let me fully flesh this out.
Okay.
I almost can't look at you.
Okay.
Because I'm so activated right now that I'm emotionally monitoring everything that you're saying. And so when I say something...
Just look at the camera. Don't look at me.
Okay, okay, here we go. Stephanie. When I see something that is connected to your childhood and we have an opportunity to heal it in the present moment, I'm all the fuck in. I will do everything that I possibly can within my power to hold space and help facilitate you healing wounds from your childhood. Period. End of day. So I'm so excited that we have awareness in this moment of this thing and how it's connected to some wound or trauma or fucking, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't have to be some big fucking wound, right? We just have awareness that there is something that's happening in our present day life that is triggering and activating something from your childhood. I want to go towards that. I want to fix it. I want to help you in the process of doing that.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
We're going to start today's episode off with what it was somebody mentioned us in a post on TikTok, shout out to Melody, and she was talking about emotional monitoring. It's one of those topics that we've covered. Actually, I don't know if we've actually covered it on this podcast before, but it's something that we've talked about a great deal in our relationship. We've done content online about it and everything like that. And if you're not familiar with emotional monitoring, it definitely stems from codependency. It stems from complex trauma. It's one of those things that when you're brought up in a home where things aren't typically calm, then you learn how to monitor the entire house and monitor the moods and the shifting energies of everybody in the house. And so it's something that we both do. We're super incredibly good at it, right? We both have black belts in emotional monitoring.
We know how to be hypervigilant completely. We will monitor.
Yeah. We'll monitor with the best of them. And go ahead.
I would say as a coping mechanism, it's not like we're saying, okay, now I'm going to pay attention. We catch ourselves after it's already been happening. It's our natural instinct to go to monitor. It's our default mode, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question was essentially, okay, you start to have awareness of something like this, right? Whether it's emotional monitoring or even just something else, awareness on the healing path and on the healing journey. And we always say awareness is the first step, right? We can't change the unconscious things unless we bring them into the conscious. And once you have awareness of something, do you just like stop doing it?
She's like, I know you just stop, right? You just stop.
Yeah. It's like, how do you change these behaviors, these coping mechanisms? How do you go through the process of really shifting all of it once you have awareness of it?
Yeah.
And when it comes to emotional monitoring, it's one of those things that it's not easy. Like you just said it, right? We still do it all the time.
You don't just stop. I mean, maybe somebody does. And if somebody does, like
nobody does.
Not taking power away, I'm like, you go for it, right? Somebody might think they do too, but it's something that we always are working on. It comes up. It comes up all the time. It's something that we bring awareness to and we catch ourselves and self-correct, and then sometimes we catch ourselves and we're like, yeah, it's because I'm right, I'm on point, I need to be here. So it is a constant thing that we work with a lot of grace, because you don't just stop. You learn how to work with it.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things too, especially in the case of emotional monitoring, it's one of those things that you have to, your environment has to be relatively calm and safe and peaceful. I mean, peaceful maybe is a stretch. It'd be great, right? But the environment definitely has to be a safe environment before you can really start to shift out of this behavior, because it is a coping mechanism, because it is connected to your nervous system. And it's like you said, babe, where it's our default, right? And if our nervous system is activated, we're already going, because that's what it comes from. Yeah. It comes from that fight, flight, or freeze or fawn response, where suddenly you're on point, you're observing everything.
It's because you weren't safe. You weren't safe and you had to be on point.
Yeah. And so if you're not in a safe environment, if it's the type of thing where you aren't, where things are still crazy and chaotic and hectic, and there's somebody in your life, whether it's a partner or, I mean, it can be anybody, right? It can even be coworkers and things like that, but somebody that causes you to kind of walk on eggshells around them, that's not really the time to
turn off this feature,
that behavior.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is an important thing to kind of dial in on and note is it's not to say that in those activated moments you can't be mindful of what's happening and aware of coping mechanisms that, you know, you want to change and shift. But I think from our experience, we can definitely say that the shift happens when you're in a safe environment. The change really starts to happen the longer you can consistently be in a calm, relaxed, regulated state. That's when shifts really start to change and happen. Otherwise, it's going to be activation, like triage, fix the problem, right? And so something like emotional monitoring really has to start to shift. And over time is really the key thing too, where it happens progressively by, like, I'll just share a little bit about what it looks like for me, because it is something that I'm constantly working on. And what it looks like for me is I will have awareness that I'm doing it. Oftentimes it's with you. You're my go-to, right? You're the person that I monitor the most because you're the one that I'm so attached to for safety and survival and everything like that. And so if I'm scared or if I'm tired or if I'm hungry, if my nervous system is fried in any way, and fried might be an extreme, right? If it's activated in any way, then I will start to look externally for ways to regulate it and control situations. That's the other thing too that I think is really subtle about emotional monitoring, is it's all about control. It's how can I control the situation so that I can feel safe in this moment? And the way that I was taught to do that, I'm speaking about myself now, the way that I was taught to do that was by trying to control the people around me. Because if I can control their actions and behaviors, then I can sit back and be like, okay, everything's calm and everything's safe now, right? So I have to be really mindful of it when it happens. And when I catch myself doing it, and what it looks like for me is I'm like, hey, baby, are you okay? What's going on? Are you feeling okay? What's up? Wait a minute. You just said you're okay, but I can tell by the way that you said it that you're not really okay. Why don't you tell me the truth of what you're feeling? And then I like get super dialed in on like, tell me what's coming up for you, rather than you just being like, I have gas or something, right? It's not to say that you have gas all the time, but
Right? Like, dude, I just got a fart. Like, give me some space.
hold on, I'm emotional. You feel like there's something coming up inside of you, baby. Like, yeah, I got a burp. I got heartburn. What do you want from me? But when I catch myself doing that, it's no longer the shame game, right? I used to just shame myself. I'm like, oh, you fucking loser. You're an adult and you're still, trying to emotionally monitor. So that process slowly over time, which we're actually going to talk about on this episode as well, right? Some of that reprogramming of shame and those stories that we tell ourselves. But that's the first step, is I catch myself doing it. I acknowledge that I'm doing it, right? I'm like, oh, here I am again, emotionally monitoring. And then I skip all of that shame and blame and confusion, and I just go straight to, what am I feeling? Yeah. What's going on in my nervous system right now that is causing me to feel this way, to react this way, to respond this way? And what I've learned is over time, the more work that I can do on regulating my nervous system, especially outside of activation, so outside of these activated moments, right? The more I can really hone in and focus on regulating my nervous system during calm moments. And literally I just said those words and then my first thought was like, oh, you're regulating your nervous system when it's calm. Good job. But that's not what it is. It's using those calm, relaxed moments to practice the techniques that keep me in a calm, relaxed state. And that helps my nervous system over time remain calm and become less activated over the simplest of things, of like you walking into the room and being upset about something, right? And then, instead of spiraling out into monitoring you and becoming hyper aware and obsessive about what you're feeling, I can just be like, oh, what's up, babe? What's going on, right? So it's really, I think it boils down to, how do we fix something, especially how do we fix emotional monitoring? How do we change these behaviors? It really boils down to recognizing what they're actually connected to and how it all stems from learning how to regulate your nervous system through healthy ways rather than kind of those maladaptive ways that were learned in childhood. What would you add, babe?
I love all that. Would add like just the starting off of the practicing in the calm moments and how crucial that is, how absolutely crucial that is.
So crucial.
Because like trying to be like, okay, I'm going to practice when shit hits the fan and I'm complete activation and I feel like everything's coming crashing down, isn't the time to practice, because you're in go mode at that stage. So being able to take time in the calm moments, which may be few and far between when you're starting off with. They may be like, here's 2 seconds that I have that I notice that I'm in some self energy. And so it's really connecting with yourself. What do I feel? Getting to know yourself a little bit in that space, what your energy feels like. Your calmness helps you separate when you're trying to pinpoint other people's actions, feelings, emotions, and behaviors. And so finding yourself, finding your techniques, finding your breath, what it feels like, what your shoulders feel like when they're down your spine. There's different like things to be in your body in a somatic way that is a calming, getting into your body, getting your attention within in the calm states. It's really, really challenging to do that when you're activated. So as much as you can practice in those spaces helps you have those skills that you're building, like that muscle memory for when activation does come up. So, and for a while, a lot of times you don't get this idea to practice until after you've already gone through a cycle. Like it came up here as all this and now afterward, and then you start shaming yourself. I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. This is where I did wrong. And that's a great moment instead of shaming yourself to be like, oh, here, I have awareness and now I'm going to practice that for a minute. So that's a really, really big deal. And a lot of times, like for myself, if I'm in a calm state, I don't want to practice activation. I don't want to practice like what I'm going to do in these things. I just want to ride that wave. I'm like, I'm in a good mood. Don't bother me. Like, I just want to feel okay for a minute. So it's really hard to think, okay, now I'm going to use this to work. But some other things that I wanted to add is it's really tricky the way that our brains work and our nervous system will work when we've been in a situation where we've cultivated this skill as a survival technique because we weren't safe.
Like the emotional monitoring.
The emotional monitoring. It's really fascinating how our brains work because they do a couple of different things. So when you've been conditioned to be in a dangerous environment, because usually it's that conditioning, it's that slow burn. It's not all of a sudden I'm in a really toxic environment because you know you're in a dangerous situation. Then it's that conditioning that takes place where things became acceptable. And then they just kind of built on each other. So you have this conditioning to where you have learned from them and from yourself on this part to start gaslighting yourself. This isn't scary. This isn't that bad. This is my fault. All the ways that it'll come up. So where you feel like you can't really trust yourself in dangerous spots. And when you start having awareness of that, your brain then becomes hypervigilant on never making that mistake. So everything is dangerous. So a lot of times when we don't feel safe, we actually might be. But the way that our nervous system is responding is that, no, this isn't safe. I'm not going to make this mistake again. I'm paying attention. Now, obviously, like if you're not safe, you're not safe. This isn't, again, where you gaslight and tell yourself, no, it's really okay. It's just my mind playing tricks on me. If you are not safe, you are not safe. And it's not the time to practice being in a calm state. But when that does come up and you find yourself emotionally monitoring, when being hypervigilant on their moods and seeing what's going on, is this actually an environment where safety is at risk? Or is this an environment where I don't feel like I have control? Is this an environment where I'm what-ifing all of these other different outcomes? Is this a situation that I am like leaning into the fear and creating a space that isn't exactly not safe? But again, that's slippery slope because when you've been conditioned, you will gaslight yourself that it's not really there. So it is almost like two ends of the spectrum. You can look at that paradox of, is it this or that? Is it I'm telling myself it's safe and it's not, or I'm telling myself it's dangerous and it's not. And you have all of this space in between that you have to learn to navigate, or you get to learn to navigate on that journey. So it is a ride. It is a journey. It is a one moment at a time. What is actually happening right now? Is this environment a dangerous environment? Am I in danger right now? Are my children in danger right now? If that's yes, then there's different steps. But it's like, if you're like, yes, absolutely, name it. Like, what is it? What is actually happening? Are they what ifs? What ifs a lot of times aren't, a lot of times are creations as opposed to what is. And again, this is you have to use your own judgment in this space, because if you're like, this is a This is a work, this is a journey space. I don't know what you're experiencing in that moment. We don't know. And this might not apply to you. And it might. So it's just something to get curious about. What does it mean to you? How does that feel in your space? Does it resonate? And if so, like what's next with that? What else can you look into and get curious about?
Yeah. Hopefully that helps a little bit. And if you're new to the podcast, we love questions. Like you can definitely email us questions. You can send them to info@stephcraig.co. If you go to our website, you can send us some messages there. It's one of those things where we love hearing what you're going through, kind of what you're processing, what's coming up for you. And hopefully that helped a little bit, Melody, in regards to kind of the emotional monitoring thing. And truthfully, I was thinking about it too. Healing is this thing that takes place over the course of life, even though we like to think of it as a, start and stop kind of thing. I wish that was the case. But truthfully, it's been this thing where we start the journey of unpacking what's going on in our life and trauma and, exploring all of these different things. And it's the path that we've been on for the majority of our relationship. But it's really, there's like different levels to it and stages of it. And we're not going to get into all the different stages of the healing journey because we don't even know what they are, right? We're probably still at level 1. There'll be a point where we recognize that, we just started this thing, even though we're probably a decade or 2 decades or 3, who knows how long we've been into it. Anyways, there's levels to the process of healing and changing things. And again, we always mention and say that awareness is that first part where you see a behavior or action of yours differently than you have seen it before, or you see that maybe patterns are repeating themselves. That's a really big one, I think, for people where we recognize that the same thing is happening over and over and over again, even though it might look a little bit different, right? I mean, sometimes it's really easy with relationships to see how you end up dating the same type of person over and over again. And the question becomes why? As soon as you have awareness of something, that follow-up question is why? Why do I do this? Why does this keep happening to me? Why can't I stop this behavior, right? I heard a podcast about it. I read a book about it. I've gone to therapy about it. I've done all of these different things. Why am I still doing this stuff? And I think for us, and I guess I should just say for me, the answer to that question always comes back to me recognizing and being able to really start at the beginning of where that behavior started. Because something like emotional monitoring is a good example, but all of our coping mechanisms that we have, all the things that we do to both regulate, meaning calm and kind of relax our nervous systems, but also all the things that we do to activate our nervous systems. Because I have a bunch of coping mechanisms that I use to activate my nervous system when it is too calm and when it is too regulated and when things are too peaceful and when they're too quiet. But all of those things I've had to look at and really explore where they started and how they came to be, because, it's not like as a child I was using alcohol or something, right? I'm trying to think of an example, but they evolve and change and morph over time. And once you have awareness of them, then the next process is, at least for me, the next step in the process of having awareness of the thing is just that, like continual awareness over and over and over and over again. So it becomes like the chop wood, carry water for me, is just bringing awareness that this action and behavior is happening. And I want to see it as much as I possibly can. So it's almost like I, have awareness suddenly that I'm doing something that I want to shift and change. Cool. I have awareness. Step 2 is show me this as much as I can possibly stand, right? I want to see it. I want to experience it. I want to watch it. I want it to come up as much as I possibly can so that I get a better understanding of what's actually happening, because it's always connected to my nervous system. It's always about what I'm feeling underneath the surface of it. And the only way that I'm going to learn that is if I get experience with it. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to have a behavior that you want to shift and change continually happen, right? You're like, damn it, why does this keep coming up? Why does this keep happening? And for me, it's because I've asked for that. I've asked to be shown this behavior, as many times as possible from as many different angles as possible so that I get a better understanding of not just where it started, but also what am I using it for, in a sense? How am I using that coping mechanism, that action, that behavior to either calm my nervous system or activate my nervous system? And then it becomes, oh, wait a minute. I have control there. I have the ability to acknowledge and then enter in all the healthy skill sets that we have learned, breath work and breathing and getting into your body and yoga and, even just like being able to express and communicate. You and I have been really leaning into emotional connection lately and trying to just talk through things more and more, which we'll go through phases where we're really, really good at. And then there's other times when we just like suck and we don't really connect. And suddenly there becomes a void there. So how does that make sense? I feel like I articulated that in a way that made sense, but
I feel like it made sense.
Okay.
It was like one of the questions I ask is like, how is this serving me? And it's not in a shameful, it's genuine curiosity of when I keep doing these things that I don't want to be doing. It's a slow down instead of why am I doing this? I need to stop. Why am I doing this? Why do I keep doing this? Because I know that round for me, like being able to, that was a loop that I couldn't break out of. And I kept trying to change a behavior that I didn't really understand. Like I could just see how it didn't help and I didn't want to do it. It didn't help and I didn't want to do it. It didn't help, didn't want to do it until I stopped and was like, how is this serving me? How is this helping me? How is this? And then like, what is it that it's trying to do? It's trying to control an outcome. It's trying to make me feel safe. It's trying to make things not feel unknown. It's what I'm used to. It's all of these things that when I could see why I was doing it, then I could see the outcome that I was actually looking for and other ways to go about it. And it didn't just like happen overnight.
Right. That's the journey part of it.
Yeah.
That's the part of it, I think, that is so critical and so important. And I think there's a human nature part of it that because we have like very clear stops and starts in life, that it's going to be like, hey, I figured it out. I know it now. It should stop. And it's like, knowing is just the beginning.
Do that all the time. It gets frustrating at times too. I'm like, I have awareness. So, they said awareness is the first step. Exactly. It's the first step. It's not the last one.
Yeah. One of the things that, and this will lead into what we're going to talk about today, because the process of shifting and changing these coping mechanisms that we use in order to regulate, or like I said, I love the distinction too, that sometimes they're not about regulation. Sometimes these coping mechanisms are about activation. I need to get adrenaline or cortisol or something flowing through my body because I'm jonesing for that fix, right? But a lot of these things, for me at least, are connected to shame. And when I have awareness that I'm doing these negative or toxic or unhealthy things that aren't beneficial for myself, then shame is the very first thing that I go to. So it becomes very self-deprecating. I become very self-deprecating. Everybody, I don't know if everybody, I'm sure everybody does this to some extent, right? So I don't need to sit and explain what it's like, the voices in our own heads about how we hate ourselves and how we're worthless and how we're stupid and fucking loser and all those different things that I, would say to myself over the years. And there comes a point in healing where you have to start replacing those with other things. You have to start reprogramming the thoughts that you have about yourself. And that process is kind of what we're going to break down and talk about today, because it's something that we've had a long time practicing. When we were talking about doing this today on the podcast, I was thinking about how long we have been practicing this idea of like positive affirmations and mantras and replacing the things that we say to ourselves with more positive, healthy, loving things, right? We've been doing it for a long time. And it's kind of finally starting to work in some way. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, I have I mean, one of my favorite ones that I use is if it's on my path, it's for my path. I don't remember where I got it from. Some of these I can remember, right? But that one helps me so much because I recognize I had a history of, things going bad in life and then spiraling out where it's like, why is this happening to me again? This is so frustrating. I'm such a loser. I can't believe I, made this mistake again. All of those kind of things. And eventually it became really clear to me that, the reason, like we were saying earlier, right? The reason I keep messing up and making these mistakes, so I get the opportunity to fix it all. So I get the opportunity to heal it. So I get the opportunity to find the core wound where it stems from. But something as simple as like, if it's on my path, it's for my path, helps my brain in that moment steer out of shame and go towards like, let me get curious about what's happening for myself right now. Let me get curious about what I'm experiencing because clearly there's something here that I'm missing. If I'm repeating patterns and cycles and behaviors, I want to learn why. And like I said earlier, a lot of times for me, it comes back to this nervous system that I've got and trying to learn how to regulate it. But that's one of my favorite ones. If it's on my path, it's for my path. And I use it all the time. And it's funny too, because you have a love-hate relationship with it where you didn't really like it for a long time. I
do. And I actually want you to talk about that. And it's a question that I'm hoping that you can shed some light on. Okay. Because other people might hear it too. And if not, but how do you distinguish the difference? How do you distinguish the difference between if it's on my path, it's for my path, and just having no impulse control?
Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate it. We set a goal for ourselves that we want to reach over 1 million people on YouTube. And truthfully, we're going to need your help to get there. So if you haven't yet, head over to YouTube and subscribe to the Steph Craig Show. And be sure to click that notification button so that you get a little ding every time we release a new episode. We're really grateful that you chose to listen to our podcast, and we hope that you're enjoying this episode. Now let's get back to it.
Because one aspect of it is if it's on my path, it's for me, and I'm diving in and saying yes, 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 which feels like there's no impulse control. Also, that could be, a flip of saying no to everything and being fearful and timid. So how does that work with you with impulsivity and recognizing you're right where you're supposed to be?
That's a great question. I'm so glad that you asked it, because I think that it's funny that you phrased it that way, because now I can see that that's kind of the lens that you were looking at some of the times over the course of our, relationship and our life and things like that. When I would throw this out at you, you're like, seriously? Like, it seems like you do have control over what's happening right now. And I'm like, no, baby. If it's on my path, it's for my path, me. Right? Yeah. And two things come to mind. First and foremost, I tend to look at things from this really right, wrong, or indifferent, right? I don't need to judge it anymore. I was going to articulate it and explain it away in case people out there are judging it, but whatever. I'm not concerned about other people's judgments, at least too much at this point in my life. I look at things from this really higher perspective, kind of like zoomed way, way, way out perspective. And to me, it's like a universal truth, this statement, where if it's happening to me, it's for me. And it's not just for me in a sense of like, well, you're going through it, right? It's for my highest and greatest good. So whatever is happening to me is for my highest and greatest good. It's always on my path, for my path. Even if those things that are happening or occurring are my own doing, even if it is, like let's take the alcoholic, for example, or somebody that's trying to quit drinking or something like that. And they have, maybe alcoholism is a little bit too strong because that's a really hard addiction. But if it's something that you have control over, a behavior or an action that seemingly has negative repercussions for your life or for the people around you, and you still are making those choices to do that thing, whatever it might be, right? I still see that as, if it's on your path, it's for your path. I still see that as part of the journey of whether it's getting you to rock bottom, whether it's, getting you to the point where you finally see how detrimental it is, whether it's getting you to the point. I mean, literally, there's so many different what if scenarios of like, we just never know what the outcome of these things are. So I've learned to trust that regardless of whatever might be happening, it's for me. It's on my path for a reason. The second thing, because that's like the zoomed out version of Craig that kind of like looks at everything in this really heightened spiritual kind of like.
Yeah, that was very like almost like valid, but almost like a bypassing answer
Exactly.
too. So.
Right. Very much. Yeah, that's just like, sorry, babe, I'm doing mushrooms again today. It is what it is because they're on my path. It's very much a bypassing answer and way to live life and move through life. So it's the duality of being able to see that part of it and then take responsibility of your actions, right? That's the part that I struggled with for a really long time, was taking responsibility for my choices and actions, where I got the opportunity to actually make a choice that was different, right? Rather than choosing the toxic behavior over and over again, I got the opportunity to make a different choice. And so a lot of it boils down to personal accountability and being able to be responsible and choose not necessarily the right thing, right? But choose the healthier thing, go towards the healthier thing. And that's something that just comes, I think, with, I think we used to think that just came with age, and eventually you grow up and you become responsible, and we fully are aware of the fact that there are plenty of fully grown adults in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s who are not responsible, who are not taking accountability for their actions or their choices. And so that part, I think, of like what allowed me what did I do to take steps in order to start being accountable for my choices and actions? That's like a whole other podcast. But that's the distinction, I think, between, at least in regards to this kind of like statement, right? If it's on your path, for your path, yes. And you have responsibility and you have accountability. And if you keep choosing the harder path, whether you think that you're choosing it or you're being guided down that path, like there's a part of me too that sees it from this higher perspective place where I'm not choosing any of these things. This shit's just where I'm at, right? I'm just riding a fucking spaceship through fucking the universe right now, experiencing whatever's coming my way, even if it seems like I'm choosing left or right or whatever the case may be. So it's always being able to dance between those two things. And the accountability part, I think, is really, really critical and really, really crucial. But I wasn't really taught accountability as a child. I wasn't taught how to, be accountable. I was taught how to lie about behaviors. I was taught how to cover up things. I was taught how to hide things. I was taught how to, avoid accountability at all costs, because
making other people's faults.
Yeah, all of those things that I learned as a child, those grew and manifested into different behaviors as an adult too. So accountability is super crucial.
That's a big portion of it too. And that's not like saying, oh, it's not your fault, but that's a big portion of the thing that we have now that I think we're just going to adopt as one of the mantras, right? It's not to blame, shame, it's to explain. And so recognizing this, oh, I never had those skills, not, I never had those skills, what do you want me to do? Just like, I never had that. So I can give myself space and grace. I keep saying that, space and grace for those actions, but then choice for how you pursue forward.
Yeah.
And so that's like, it's a big component that you were taught that it wasn't your fault. You weren't doing anything wrong. People were misunderstanding. People weren't good, just like all the ways until all of the things that you learn. That's a big component of why. That's a big component of the explanation when you're working through and shifting up and bringing in accountability. Like that's a big important part that often gets bypassed because it sounds like it's continued behavior. Well, I wasn't taught that.
Right.
It's not and it can be used as that, but that's not how you were approaching it at that
I did
moment.
for a while.
You did for a while.
Like that's the other thing is all of these are like, there's levels of healing with all of this stuff, right? So this little example that we're talking about right now where it's like I avoid accountability and then I'm just like, sorry, the universe did its thing. Sucks to be you. If it's on our path, it's for our path, babe. That was a part of my healing, right? Because I almost had to do that enough until finally I saw it. And I'm like, oh, I'm really bypassing all accountability here. And I can see where it started and I can see where it's connected from. So it's the opportunity to continually get curious about where do these behaviors actually stem from and originate from. And that's why I think relationships are so crucial and so critical. I mean, our healing has come through our relationship because we do like continually not just hold up the mirror, but like everything you call me out on consistently over and over and over and over again, all these little behaviors that are like annoying and like become the things that it's like, you know, how am I trying to phrase this? It's like all those little, there's a difference between like the cute little idiosyncrasies. I can't ever say that word clearly. I want to so badly. All those little quirks that people have, there's a difference, I think, between the little quirks just being cute little things that we kind of, like little tiny annoyances about each other that we just kind of deal with, right? I'm not sitting here expecting you to change all of your little quirks and all your little things, and I know that you don't of me either, even though we spent plenty of years expecting that. And then there's this other part, this other component where there's actions and behaviors that could get labeled as like, this is just who I am, or this is just a little quirk of mine, deal with it, that really aren't, that they're really toxic behaviors that need to change, and they're connected to childhood.
Yeah.
And you show those to me by the things that you, and I don't mean this in a negative way.
No, let's hear this. What do you got?
But it's by those things that you continually bitch about in regards to the way that I do things. Like the things that you keep bitching about me, I have learned over the years where it's not like, hey, just fix yourself because you're being an ass. No, you're pointing at behaviors of mine that are maladaptive behaviors from childhood, that come from childhood, that I need to look at and address. So when I'm defensive against the things that you bring to me consistently over the course of years, and every relationship has these things, right? Every relationship has those things where one partner is like, hey, you really need to stop doing this thing. And then the other partner's like, fuck off. That's not, I'm like, you need to stop bugging me about that thing. This thing ain't changing. I'm doing this thing because I don't think there's a problem with the thing that I'm doing. In reality, you're highlighting the wound that I need to go look at and address. And so I'm going to like, this might take us off on a tangent because we're really wanting to talk about these mantras and things, right?
Might not make it.
And we have a whole list of ones that we've used, and they're so critically important, and they've played a really big role in our healing. But you have consistently for years talked about how you get frustrated by you're the only one that does the laundry, you're the only one that does the cleaning, you're the only one that does the dishes. And I have a narrative in my head about that every time you bring it up. And I'm defensive about it every time you bring it up. And every time you bring it up, I go into that defensive mindset where I have all of my arguments about, you know, I'm not going to go through all of them. The point of what I'm bringing up right now is this dynamic where you're highlighting something that I need to change. And the fact that I know that I need to change it is because I become defensive against it. And so if I'm becoming defensive against it, then that's my indication that I'm protecting something inside. There's something that is like not wanting to be looked at. There's a part of my nervous system that is activated because suddenly I'm defensive. Now, huge caveat, there is a dynamic that plays out in relationships where somebody is overly like nagging and wants to blame the other person. And like, that's a toxic pattern and cycle. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like run-of-the-mill regular stuff in relationships where, you know, you bitch about this, I bitch about that. And it's just kind of the stuff that we carry through the course of our relationship, but we don't ever really change them. It's just like the things that we bitch about.
Yeah, I'm kind of not seeing it that way. And I'm gonna shed my little because it's like, hold on.
Hold on a minute.
Hold on a minute.
Well, I wanted to talk to, don't let me, go ahead.
If if it's still about that, but if you're gonna like drop that and then move on to the next topic, I'm like, oh, we're gonna stay here for a minute.
Well, I don't want you to forget, but I wasn't quite finished articulating.
Keep
Because
articulating.
what
I
I've
won't
realized, because this is recent, this is like in the last couple of weeks, we've had this quote unquote argument again, right? Where it's like you are telling me that you're frustrated because you're the only one that takes care of laundry. And then in my head, I'm like, yep, you're the only one that does laundry. And then I'm like, wait a minute. And I know that this is really obvious on some level, right? And I know that there's probably women out there that are like shaking their head right now. And there's probably plenty of men out there as well. But the reality is, because I grew up and my mother did all of that all the time, and I was required such little, like the level of responsibility that I had in regards to like maintaining the house was so minimal. That's all I'm doing is perpetuating that and continuing that cycle. And so what I've recognized is I don't want to be in a relationship ever where one person, you or me, right? I wouldn't want to carry this burden either, feel so underappreciated and undervalued consistently because of something that I'm not doing, especially when it's something that is so simple and easy to just like fold laundry or put away dishes or pick up after myself and do these little tiny things. Like that's a level of accountability and responsibility that I'm ashamed to say I have struggled with all through even adulthood. And I've taken it for granted. And that's something that I don't want to do anymore. And I can see, like it's interesting because the fact that I've been so defensive about it over these years indicates to me that there's something deeper in there that I need to really sit with and understand. But I don't have full understanding yet of what it's totally connected to in a sense. I know it's childhood. I can kind of start to see some of it. I can't figure it all out quite yet. But what I do know is I don't need to wait for that process to kind of totally flesh out. I don't need to fix the puzzle of the past before I can, change the future. Right now, I can just start doing shit. I have control over my actions in the present moment, and I'll continually process it and kind of sit with it and see what comes up. Okay. Thank you for letting me kind of finish fleshing that all out.
Yeah.
What were you going to say about it?
I'm trying to not be in my feels as much as I'm in my feels.
Okay.
Because that's your experience.
Yes.
And your experience is I bitch to you because I'm the only one that does the cleaning and I'm constantly bitching at you. And my experience is so different. So I'm really in my feels right now. And I'm trying to just be like, okay, this is a great conversation to open up. Because your point of view is valid. And you also had some really great accountability. You were like, I wasn't expected to do this. I didn't have to, and I'm expecting it of you. And so I don't want to bypass that either. And I'm struggling not to be in my feels so much. I'm like, it's also interesting. It's really fascinating that that's your perspective. You know what I mean? And then I have such a completely different perspective. And it's like it's so fascinating how we coexist with two different perspectives.
Such different realities, right?
And it's like, that's a big deal to have awareness to, because my reality is very real. My perspective is very real. So is yours. And where a lot of times people get into trouble is when I'm struggling right now with my feels to be like, actually, your reality is wrong and my reality is right. And you need to see it my way. And it's so hard to navigate advocating for yourself and bypassing somebody else's experience. And so I'm in my feels and I'm trying to figure out how I can articulate my experience without bypassing you. And it's hard. It's hard. It's like, I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to get it wrong because this is a sloppy practice for me. And I'm going to do my best. And no, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I'm practicing here with the tools that I have at this moment.
Let's do it.
So I'm open to keeping this conversation going and hearing your perspective.
Let's practice it.
Okay. See if I can do it without being, see if I can just keep myself space here. So there's like,
just growl.
it did it. Like there's another part too. It's like where I want to get into story. And I'm like, I just need to speak to what we just talked about. I want to get into story of like this and this and this and this, but I'm just going to stay here and not get into story. Because that's another time that you can tell when you start to really get into story.
Right. Got to explain away everything so then they understand where you're coming from.
My perspective in a short frame, we'll see if I can do it short-winded. My perspective is I don't say anything about doing the laundry, about scrubbing, about doing all the stuff, all the cleaning until you throw something at me with it. I'm like, there's frustration, and it's not always a verbal. It's if you're slamming, doing something, or with the passive, like there's a load of laundry on the bed. And what you'll do is you'll go through and pick out your stuff and hang them up and leave everything else. And be like, well, I don't know how you like it. Or, hey, will you clean this up when things are getting out of control because I don't have the energy for it, and it piles up. So the narrative is it doesn't get done unless I do it. And then you're like, hey, will you clean this? And the last time you asked me to clean the stuff off the bathroom counter, I was like, you know what? If you see something that needs to be done, you are more than capable to do it yourself. And so it's interesting because mine is, I just take that. I don't mind. I mind when I get in trouble. It feels like a child and a parent. I get in trouble when my chores aren't done and you get mad and you're slamming stuff.
Okay.
I take that offensively. I take it offensively when you are like, I'm not going to do shit for the rest of your clothes, but I'll take mine out. I take that offensively. Or when you're like, hey, clean this up, right? My perspective. Then I get very like, are you kidding me? And then I come at you. So your perspective is I'm bitching at you all the time for not doing this. And my perspective is very different. So it's confusing. And it's like, again, I'm trying not to be in my feels because my feelings are a little bit hurt by that because my perspective is so strong. And I'm presuming that your perspective is equally as strong. So your feelings might be hurt right now thinking, wow, you think you don't say anything unless? Do you not even realize how you talk to me or something? Like, I don't know. But I know you're not an ass. So, I mean, sometimes I think you are.
I am sometimes.
I know you're not an ass. And my perspective, like for you to not see it that way, kind of paints you in a picture that maybe, So I know that there's another angle. I know that there's another perspective. There's truth to yours and there's truth to mine. And somewhere in the middle, we have what's really going on.
See, I don't even think that somewhere in the, first off, thank you. Before I spiral, I understand that expressing, like we might just be talking about folding clothes and doing dishes and scrubbing toilets and stuff right now, but it's connected to so many different things.
Yeah.
Because what you just said was you brought up feeling like you were getting in trouble for chores, right?
Yeah.
And so suddenly you're in a activated state that you used to get in as a child, and it's being activated and triggered by shit that we're experiencing as adults right now in our relationship. And I think the same can be said, like I said earlier, where I don't have total clarity over all the ways that this is connected to my childhood, but I can tell that it is.
Yeah.
I can tell that there's, when you get upset with me about not helping with something, or when you get upset with me, I guess is just an easy way to put it too, right? Because you get upset with me for other things too. When you get upset with me, I immediately feel like a child. I immediately feel like I'm in trouble. And the only way, I mean, the ways that I used to handle getting, like if I was in trouble as a kid, I had a couple of different ways of dealing with it.
Yeah.
And the first one usually was like, I'm trying to think maybe. I don't know. See, sometimes we're on this podcast of ours, live healing shit.
Right.
Because I'm sitting here processing this right now, trying to figure out exactly what I would do. When I was a kid and I would get in trouble, my go-to was to hide. Like I would try to avoid the situation as much as possible, whether I knew I was going to be in trouble or suddenly it was like, oh, there's trouble. I'm like, I got to fucking get out of here. Like my first response, I think, is flee, right? I'm trying to figure out a way to get out of this. And sometimes that flee looks like, because I can recognize that I do this now in our relationship too, where I'll ignore you, right? And that isn't me, like that's the silent treatment. That's me basically ignoring what you're expressing and communicating because I'm activated and scared. And that's my way of like trying to flee a situation when I can't actually leave a situation. So maybe that's dissociation. Maybe that's whatever the case may be, right? But I can see how that comes across to really, really shitty. And if those things don't work, or depending upon the circumstances, then I go to fight. Then I go to defend. Then I'll go to blame everything else. You know, don't you see that I'm mowing the lawn? I can't believe you don't see that I'm mowing the lawn every single day. And it's funny that we're talking about this because, again, this isn't like a super critical part of our relationship, I think. But at the same time, this is something that what's cool about it is I think we are fleshing out and recognizing how this, like I said, this not super critical part of our relationship. However, very much is connected to childhood, very much connected to wounds that we both have in some way about things that we need to understand more. I want to understand them more.
How often have we said, like, you keep fighting about the dishes? It's not about the dishes.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Case in point.
Exactly.
Like, it's not about the dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's hysterical,
it's historical. Hey, how does this fit in with if it's on your path, it's for your path?
That's exactly.
Right?
It fits in perfectly for it.
Give
right?
an example.
Because
I'm like seeing it. Like, here it is. It keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. You were saying that you like to like keep showing me till I can get it and learn. And at first, because like I also have the avoidant thing, I'm like, I don't want to keep being shown. I just want to get it right the first time and be able to be done with it. Okay, I messed up again. Let's just get it right. I don't want to keep having to learn it. And you're like, yeah, keep showing me, because I want to get it. And so I see that now. It keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. It keeps coming up in different ways. It's been coming up as one perspective for me, and it's been coming up as one perspective for you. And so here we are. And now, through the magical healing of the podcast, we get to have this come in and a real life conversation.
Yeah.
Like coming up, it's like, oh, we're seeing this. I'm seeing it from your point of view now. And you're seeing it from my point of view, or at least I think you are. We want to take a moment and really thank you for sharing your time with us. We know it's a valuable asset that you have, and we're honored that you're spending it with us. We both have experiences over the years where podcasts have helped us and influenced us greatly. That's why we're so passionate about podcasting, and we have a big mission with this show. We aim to reach over 1 million people, and we need your help. If you wouldn't mind doing these 3 things, it will help us grow and expand and reach more people. First off, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. You can click the notification button as well so you don't miss an episode each time a new one is released. Secondly, if you would take a minute and leave us a review, that helps the podcast grow and expand as well. And last up, share it with somebody who you think might benefit, because we believe we all do better when we heal together. That's it. Thank you. We appreciate everything. Now back to the show. Right?
See, this is the really cool thing that we do too. I am seeing it from your point of view.
Okay.
This is the beauty of stuff that when we get to a certain, like, I'm going to put us up on this high horse.
Okay,
right now.
here we go.
Here we are, Steph Craig.
Okay,
up
do
on
I
this
got my
high
red
horse.
pants on?
Even though we fully acknowledge that we, on other areas, have no fucking idea what we're doing.
I mean, clearly we're practicing everything.
What I love about this thing that's happening right now that we're talking about and fleshing out is, as soon as I see something that is in relation to helping you, and what I mean by that is, like, I'm not helping you in this space. Let me fully flesh this out.
Okay.
I almost
got this.
can't look at you.
Okay.
Because I'm so activated right now that I'm emotionally monitoring everything that you're saying. And so when I say
Just
something,
look at the camera. Don't look at me.
Okay, okay, here we go. Stephanie, when I see something that is connected to your childhood and we have an opportunity to heal it in the present moment, I'm all the fuck in. I will do everything that I possibly can within my power to hold space and help facilitate you healing wounds from your childhood. Period. End of day. So I'm so excited that we have awareness in this moment of this thing and how it's connected to some wound or trauma or fucking, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't have to be some big fucking wound, right? We just have awareness that there is something that's happening in our present day life that is triggering and activating something from your childhood. I want to go towards that and I want to fix it and I want to help you in the process of doing that. And I know that there's like, I'm not fixing anything. Like literally, I'm just like, cool. What do we need to do now? Because I'm all about helping you heal that part by what I can do. Because it's twofold, right? Where we have these awarenesses where, oh, I'm playing out some role and I'm, doing this thing, these actions and behaviors that spark this wound in childhood. Just as I'm doing that in a negative way with my actions and behaviors, I can do it in a positive way. I can help in that process of reparenting that little inner child in a sense and making it a safe environment for them to then feel safe to be seen and loved and validated and everything like that. So I get all fired up when I find things like this in our relationship where it's like, oh, this is going to help you. I'm so ready. I'm all in. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
Can I look at you now?
You can look at me now. And I want to validate you and like share like what came up for me with that. It's the same. Like, oh, this is a childhood wound. And it also like takes some of the, like when I can see that focus and it can go into like, is this a codependent tactic? Is this, one of the ways? But what I see is, oh, this is an inner child thing. You feel like you're in trouble. You feel like I obviously can relate to that. So instead of taking it so fucking personal when you're like slamming something because you're in a bad mood, and that's not saying that it's okay to go around slamming stuff. Like obviously
doors, like, cabinets,
it doesn't need
whatever.
to happen,
Yeah.
right? But that's something that I'm not going to coddle either. But when I'm recognizing like, hey, clean this up, you clean off the bathroom counter, and that's not how you said it. But like when you're saying, I want you to clean something that hasn't been cleaned, because instead of being like, I'm fucking overwhelmed, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm going through shit, I don't feel supported, loved, seen in this space, I feel like it's all up to me, all of these ways that I'm feeling personally attacked. And then I come at you with, why don't you pick it up? Why don't you? Or then maybe I model the same behavior and I ignore you. Or I get up and I slam stuff, right? All these things that if you're doing it, like the mirror is there, even when like we don't want to see it, not me, clearly not me. It's just you. The mirror is there. So I have awareness of that. Oh, you feel like you're in trouble. So when that comes up and I feel personally attacked, I can just ask you and say like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Sir, can you help me with this? I feel really overwhelmed. I don't have not even asking for help. Be like, I don't have the energy to do this right now. I know that counter needs to be cleaned off. I don't have it in me. I'm sorry, but I'm not getting to that. How different would that feel for me to own my emotions, right? Not take it personally. I'm not being attacked. I'm not getting in trouble. I'm not at home getting in trouble by a parent. She's like, I don't have it. Or like, it's not on my priority list. It's just not there. Could you help me with that? It needs to be done. Like that would feel better. Just saying that feels like, oh my gosh,
right?
That's so much better in me. And then you hearing that, are you feeling in trouble? Are you feeling attacked? Or you're like,
totally.
I know what's going on. I know how she's feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
she doesn't have it in it. Is it a priority for me? It's not, oh, she asked for help. That's such a different space that we haven't had because I'm feeling unappreciated and attacked. And you feel like I'm always bitching at you for not doing stuff. And we just keep recreating this wound with each other. That we've been doing this for a while. And now we finally see, oh, I just need to tell you I'm overwhelmed and not have it, instead of taking it as I feel like I'm failing. So you're definitely telling me how I'm feeling. I feel like just taking my whole childhood and saying this is reenacting. this is happening again. It's what we were speaking earlier about how when we've been conditioned for a certain thing, our brain will keep validating it. When we look for it, our brain will keep validating it. So I think this is this. And then I wait till I see it. And then as soon as I see it, I'm like, ha ha, this is where you were wrong. This is where you should be doing things different.
Yeah. And that stuff, I think, happens, that thing where we will validate the things that we want validated, right? That, I believe, happens both consciously and subconsciously. So we can drive around and be like, I want to see yellow cars. And then we just see nothing but yellow cars everywhere. And then unconsciously, there's a bunch of things too, because it's almost like pattern recognition. As we're continuing to unpack all of this and think about it more and talk about it more, I'm recognizing that there's a dynamic here. And again, this is like really silliness that we're talking about, like laundry and dishes and house cleaning and things like that. But
it's silliness, but it's not.
Well, it goes to like the programming of what relationships are. So you and I both have a program around what relationships are, right? What marriage is, what a man and a woman together living under a house, we have a program about what that looks like. And it's based off of our childhood. It's based off of, we know what it's based off of. That program has conscious things and unconscious things. And I think what we're talking about right now, and when it comes to this house cleaning stuff, that is an unconscious program that I have that is like, well, and here we go again, stating the obvious. There's so many times where I state the obvious. I'm like, yeah, that's a program from society that men don't do that stuff, that women do that stuff. And I'm sorry that that's hard for you. And here I go, like, I almost can't look at you because I'm still emotionally monitoring. I'm sorry that that's hard for you to clean the house, but in the meantime, I'm doing all of these other things that are man things. That was my argument for this discussion for a while.
Yeah.
Where it was like, we just have equal roles in taking care of the house stuff, right? Where I do these things, and I had a list that I would like, I do the oil changes, I mow the lawn, I pick up the dog shit, I do all these like man things, quote unquote. It's all horse shit because it's just programming that I have from my family dynamics growing up that I saw my parents as well as society. And so then it again gets to become, wait a minute, I think it's dog shit. I don't want to continue my life that way. I get to choose how I actually want to reprogram my brain and how I see relationships. And the healthy relationship that you and I have at this point is something that I've never seen before. I don't have an example to draw from. So we're live actioning, creating this example for both our present moment adult selves to kind of process and understand and take in, as well as like inner child Craig to see what a healthy version of relationships can actually look like, which is cool. But it's like, oh, we can fix all of this stuff. And yeah, I think the things that stand out to me as we continually have talked about this, because again, we were supposed to talk about mantras and things that we would say to ourselves to help reprogram the brain.
Which we still are going to.
We'll
just
get
not
to that
this
episode at some point. But what I'm recognizing is how many of these things that are taking place in our relationship right now, maybe we need to really get curious about this. I'm going to get curious about it. You do you, boo-boo. But how many of these things are taking place right now in our relationship that are unconsciously programmed into us that I actually say, fuck all, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to participate in that anymore. That's a program that I don't believe in, that I don't feel like we need to continually perpetuate. And so we get to get curious.
Yeah.
Anything else, babe?
Only a lifetime's worth.
Should we go do some dishes and some laundry together?
Dishes and some laundry.
Clean off the kitchen counter.
Let's go pick up some dog shit as a team. We need 2 mowers now. I want to mow right along with you.
Yes.
Codependent to the end,
exactly.
baby.
We're mowing this lawn together, baby. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Go follow us everywhere and subscribe to us on YouTube and share the podcast with somebody and expect the best.
Plan for the greatest.
We'll see you soon.
Got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me. we were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.